Hello, my name is Cole Doherty, and I will be presenting drug overdose deaths in Connecticut from the years 2012 to 2018. So the outline of this presentation will be the data set, which is exactly what is going on, what is the data showing, how exactly I chose it, why I chose it, things like that, if I had to wrangle the data set, things like that. Next will be the questions, the initial questions I had before making these visualizations and the data, and if there was any follow-up questions and how these questions, if they were answered or if they weren't answered. And while I'm explaining these visualizations, I will have the discoveries. I will explain the discoveries while I make these different visualizations, or while I present the different visualizations. Then finally, I'll have a conclusion that will be a take-home message, what I want you to get out of this presentation. So the dataset, the structure of the dataset, it shows a lot of different demographics, including race, whether you're white, black, Hispanic, any other minority, the age you are, where you live, what city you lived in, when you died, where you died, whether that be a hospital, things like that, the amount of deaths per drug for that specific location, a lot of different subcategories. The inspiration I drew for this is the fact that I didn't really like any of the datasets that were given, so I went on Kaggle and I searched endlessly for a good dataset, and I finally came across one that was interesting to me. And there was no wrangling that I had to do. It was a pretty clean dataset overall. Questions. So the initial questions I had were between each of the drugs, which one has the highest amount of deaths? Do females or males have a higher death rate? And which race has the highest amount of drug overdose deaths? So I'll explain the evolution of these questions if they get answered while I'm explaining these visualizations in the next slide. And if there were any follow-up questions to these initial questions. So the first question, or the first graph, all of these graphs were made through Tableau. The first graph shows the total overdose deaths for different drugs in Connecticut, and as you can see, fentanyl, heroin, and cocaine are the top 3 drugs. All of these graphs I'm going to show are going to be comparing fentanyl, heroin, and cocaine to one another. The next graph shows the fentanyl and heroin-induced deaths among cities in Connecticut. As you can see, Hartford is one of the biggest cities in Connecticut, and it has the highest amount of fentanyl and heroin deaths. Fentanyl and heroin-induced deaths among counties in Connecticut. Hartford, ironically, is also a county, and it has the highest fentanyl deaths, and for heroin is actually New Haven, which is another very large county. Heroin and fentanyl induced deaths among males and females. As you can see, fentanyl deaths is very, very high for males as the years go on. It's rising steadily, while heroin and fentanyl deaths for females are very low. It doesn't even break 200 deaths. And heroin deaths for males it was rising, and now it's declining a little bit. Location of death. So for just heroin in the city of Hartford, this is a fun little one I made. Residents and hospital have the highest location for the deaths. These next 3 graphs show the amount of cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl deaths for each age group. This one is just showing cocaine deaths, and as you can see, this is for 40 to 50 year old range. That's where the highest amount of cocaine deaths occur. And for heroin, it's a little bit younger. It's in the 20s. And for fentanyl, it is also in the 20s to 30s. This graph shows the total fentanyl, heroin, and cocaine deaths for each year from 2012 to 2018. And it shows a rise in fentanyl, while for heroin over the years it is declining. And for cocaine, it was rising and now it's flattening out. And this is a follow-up question to my initial questions that ask which drug has the highest amount of deaths. As you can see, it is fentanyl. But a follow-up question to that would be, now with the opioid crisis, it would be interesting to see if that drug would surpass fentanyl because of the amount of people that are dying from opioids and becoming addicted to them. Yeah, so this last graph is also another follow-up question to one of the initial questions I had, which was which race has the highest amount of deaths? And specifically for fentanyl, it is white people. And I did do all the other two drugs as well. I did heroin and cocaine, but I didn't show them. It is also white people. And it's a little bit biased because in Connecticut, it is mostly white people that live in this state. So that question is a little bit biased, and yeah. So those are all the discoveries I made. It was very interesting to see the fact that the different age brackets. I would have thought that cocaine would have been a drug that would appeal to younger people, like college students maybe, but it was actually for middle-aged people, like from their 40s to 50s, which I thought was very interesting and a little bit weird. Very surprising. And this one is pretty surprising as well, that fentanyl is on the rise compared to heroin and cocaine. I would think cocaine would be on the rise because it's a little bit, I think it's a little bit more safer than fentanyl. So the conclusion is, from this one statement is that white middle-aged men who live in the most populous cities in Connecticut, Hartford, Bridgeport, and New Haven, have the highest drug overdose deaths in Connecticut compared to any other demographic. That is the main core discovery that I found. And also, just don't do drugs. That's another take-home message.